with the ballad of songs and snakes. It's kind of break down my top five Hunger Games films, where we rank the Hunger Games films from worst to best. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, ring the bell if you're new. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, movie rankings, and every Monday I do box office breakdown shows. So please subscribe, ring the bell, comment down below. What is your ranking of the five Hunger Games films? Do you want to see more to the franchise, or this should be the only five films of the franchise? As well. Leave a like, guys, the thumbs up button down below to how you support this channel. So as I said in my non-spoiler review of the new Hunger Games film, I did rewatch. Again, I grew up with this franchise. Again, the first movie came out, for reference for you guys, when I was 10 years old. So I've really have grown up with this franchise. And it's one I have nostalgia for, but I also hadn't watched it in a while. So before leading into the new film, I did rewatch all four leading into the new film. So these are all very much fresh in my mind. I have clear thoughts. So for the four films that are not the new one, I will be doing spoilers, but not for the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, just in case you just wanted to watch this ranking to see where this movie fit compared to the rest of the franchise. So let's get started with my ranking of the Hunger Games films, starting from worst to best. So starting at number 5 for me is the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. I really do feel like that this is one of the most unsatisfying endings to a franchise, because I remember watching this film in the theater, and then I've only seen it, I think, twice. And even I rewatched it again last night on Thursday night before I saw the new one on Friday. And it felt like I forgot the whole movie, because a lot of the things that happened were like surprising to me, and I completely forgot that these were certain plot points in the movie. So it's a forgettable film, but I do believe that the utmost, my biggest problem with this movie is that it is just too unsatisfying for me. We've built this whole franchise on a collision course for Katniss to face off against President Snow. But in this movie, the whole twist of it, that Julianne Moore's President Coin is the actual overall big bad of this franchise, as she is the one who dropped, with the help of Gale, dropped all of these bombs on innocent people and children, and Prim, Katniss' sister. And this then leads to a really great scene, I think the best scene of the whole movie, between Katniss and Snow, but it leads to a very predictable ending, which was Katniss killing Coin after Coin basically wanted them to do the Hunger Games again. I think the only death that I really cared about in this movie was actually Mahershala Ali's character of Boggs. He was like the head security guy for District 13, and he's like the only one who really cared about Katniss when they were out. Coin clearly wanted her Katniss in the field so she can get killed. She did not need Katniss anymore, being a symbol of the rebellion. And that's even why Coin sends Peeta to them. But Boggs always says, I'm never going to let you die. You're going to finish what you came here to do, and I'm going to make that happen. And of course, Boggs' sacrifice, I think, and death is the only one that I think rings true. I even think Finnick, who is a great character in Catching Fire, really fell off here with both Mockingjay films, and his death didn't really feel as emotional as I remember when I saw in the theater now 8 years ago. You can definitely tell towards the back half of the movie when kind of Philip Seymour Hoffman died in the middle of filming. A couple of the scenes don't ring as hollow, because especially like Haymitch at the end reading a letter to Katniss that Plutarch sent, you can just obviously know that was supposed to be Philip Seymour Hoffman saying that to her, but it was pronounced to be Haymitch. And I do think that this love triangle that they just continue to try to go down the rabbit hole is useless for me in this movie. Gale has never been a character that I've liked, and I've never thought that Katniss should ever be with Gale. Peeta's kind of been the only good person from start to finish of this really whole franchise. Katniss has kind of kept Gale involved in this love triangle, but it really has always been Peeta, especially in Catching Fire. I guess that's the satisfying part, that they end up together, but it's an overall unsatisfying film that I just do not like to rewatch now after seeing it for the third time this past week. Coming in at number 4 for me is Mockingjay Part 1. Now, the reason why I think Mockingjay Part 1 is above Part 2 for me is I actually do like the ending that this sets up for Part 2. That Part 2 I think really does fumble, which is there's a clear, I think, with other Part 1s. Now this, I'll get to some of the issues I have with this movie. The good part about the movie is I do love the destination of, or the beginning of the movie, Peeta is captured, And that is all Katniss is thinking about. She has these nightmares in catching fire. She is the one who wanted to die. She told Haymitch that he's the one. Peeta has to make it out of this game this time. And she then gets saved and they leave Peeta behind. And then you see Peeta basically, he looks awful on these screens throughout the entire movie. And it leads to a chilling ending with Peeta basically injuring Katniss by choking her out and him basically being restrained to end the movie. It's a horrifying, bleak, but really great ending to the movie that really has always stuck with me since seeing part one. Now, this movie does have the usual part one syndromes of a part one setting up a part two, which is that this movie clearly killed so much time in this movie that they knew they had to save a lot of the stuff for part two. So it just felt like they were kind of just moosering around, very similar to how I feel about Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part One. For example, there's even a scene in this movie where Gale goes to Katniss and says, "Oh, we have good news. We have shelter above, and we can have trees and stuff." They go up, they chill out for 5 minutes, and then they come right back down. There's just so many scenes where they're just meandering for no reason. You can clearly tell they're just trying to kill time to fill out a runtime to make this a part one. Again, the Mockingjay should have just been one movie and not a part one and a part two. I think it was a massive mistake by Lionsgate, and it really did derail the franchise after a really solid start. It's not a bad movie in my opinion, but it's kind of just a whatever for a mediocre film. Another major problem for me with this movie is also President Coin, as I said, played by Julianne Moore in the last film, but in part two. But there's just no background reason why we should care about her. At the end of Catching Fire, it's Plutarch, the one that had the idea to get Katniss, but we just get District 13. She's the president, and she just doesn't like Katniss. That's her only character traits. And I think it's one of the biggest reason why these two Mockingjay films just never came together for me. So that's why Mockingjay Part One comes in at number 4. Now, coming at number 3 for me is the new film, Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And all in up, I like and to love the rest of the films on this franchise. This one is one of the biggest surprises that I've seen in the theater this year. President Snow was one of the most captivating characters of the original 4 films. And I think this prequel actually made sense. It didn't feel like this movie was made for money purposes. Obviously, the book that the writer of the original books came out a couple years ago. It all makes sense from that perspective. Suzanne Collins' book. But this movie just doesn't feel like a cash grab. It feels like a movie that does make sense and fits because we're going back in time 64 years before the original Hunger Games. And we're learning about what it takes, what Snow learns to make the Hunger Games what it was. Because when the movie starts, the Hunger Games is in its 10th games. It's not watched widely by the public. And Snow, and they bring these mentors in to the actual participants of the games in order to gain interest. And how, Rachel Zegler's character, who can sing and she has this innocence to her that will actually captivate people to bet on the games and send supplies and root for people in the actual games. I think the first 2 parts of this movie, first 2 acts, are really excellent and captivating. I do think the third act of this movie, the last 50 minutes, is kind of a slog. It's kind of a mess and it's boring. And I feel like they easily could have cut a couple of the scenes out of the movie or just kept the pacing was so good for the first 2 acts, and it kind of comes to a halt for the last 50 minutes of the movie. And I think we need to care more about the other characters in this version of the Hunger Games. It just felt like we cared about one person in this version of the Hunger Games, but still, Tom Blythe brought it as the younger version of Snow. Jason Schwartzman and Viola Davis were standout side characters, as well as Hunter Schafer. But it does come down to Tom Blythe, and Snow is a captivating character, and it makes this movie absolutely, for me, a really solid entry into the franchise. Slightly above it for me is the original Hunger Games film back in 2012. Now, I think maybe on a movie sense, the more I rewatch Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I actually might put that above the original Hunger Games. But for now, just for nostalgia purposes, this film comes in at number 1, the only film in this franchise directed by Gary Ross. And it is our introduction really to Jennifer Lawrence as a lead actor in Hollywood. It is very iconic. The opening 15 minutes are really moving when you have the dread of the reaping and then Prim, who is someone so young, getting pulled out of the hat, and the fact of Katniss being someone who's the first ever volunteer for the games right away just puts you in an uncomfortable feeling for the rest of the movie. The opening, when I forgot how good it was, but when I rewatched it a couple days ago, the opening is really depressing and sad. And I think it really adds to that vibe overall of the movie. We also just have another fantastic cast. Donald Sutherland was perfectly cast. Really love Josh Hutcherson in this franchise as Peeta. You have Woody Harrelson, Elizabeth Banks, Lenny Kravitz, Stanley Tucci, even Amanda Stenberg, who's great as Rue, and Alexander Ludwig as Cato. Really iconic casting. Now, my biggest problem with the original Hunger Games for me is that the actual buildup and the politics and the stuff leading into the games is 10 times more interesting than the games themselves in this movie. There's just a scene where, Peeta, we think could be actually helping out Cato, and they find Katniss, and Katniss is hiding up in a tree, and then Cato tells all these jerks, let's just wait it out. Katniss can't go anywhere, just wait it out. And why would they wait it out? It always frustrates me when they do that. I think Cato is the most cliche character of the franchise. He's only elevated by Ludwig's performance, but when you think about it, just a very cliche character. I have never liked Gale in this franchise, and I've never bought Gale and Katniss ever. I really don't buy it in this opening film. Quickly, I buy the relationship between Peeta and Katniss very quickly. But as I said, the build-up to the games is really good, but the actual games themselves for me are just not that interesting until like the very end of the movie. So that's why the original Hunger Games for me comes in number 2. But by far and away for me, the best film of this franchise is Catching Fire. I think it is a fantastic movie. I think if you're thinking about like a perfect Hunger Games film, this is kind of the only one that gets close to that mark. The first one, the franchise directed by Francis Lawrence, who went off to direct the next 4 films of the franchise. But this has the most entertaining both setup for the games, the fact that Katniss and Peeta are brought back into the games, and because Snow is so pissed off that the original game maker, played by Wes Bentley, let 2 victors happen, that he is so pissed off that Katniss is starting these rebels and revolts and stuff like that, that all of the returning victors are now back in the Hunger Games, which you get really cool new characters like Finnick, played by Sam Claflin. You have Beatty, played by Jeffrey Wright. Again, these casts are utterly fantastic. Jenna Malone as Joanna, just memorable characters in the actual games. I think this is the only film of the entire franchise that with the games themselves, you care about more than just Katniss and Peter. You care about one person. There are so many really good side characters in the games, which make them more intense. Obviously, with the idea of them trying to kill Katniss and things like that. There's a lot more inventive things involved in the actual games themselves. There's also just so many stakes in this movie. Cinna gets killed right before Katniss goes into the games, goes into the actual games, and it's already a rough way to start. You have a new game maker, Plutarch, who seems very destined to kill Katniss. He is the one who's like the mind maker, the person who creates the escape, actually, for Katniss. This for me just easily. Also, the relationship between Katniss and Peeta is off the charts. Really fantastic for me in this movie. Also because Katniss just leaves Peeta hanging after the first Hunger Games film. She starts this fling again with Gale, and I think she really realized how valuable and really what a great person Peeta is. Peeta is a really sweet human being who deserves to be with Katniss, and Peeta's tried to be a good person throughout the entire movie. You don't know who to trust also in this movie. Finnick gets stereotyped as maybe the next Cato, but Katniss learns to like him. And Joanna seems to be a total wild card into the fray. So overall, this for me is easily the best film of the franchise. I don't think they've come close yet to even touching Catching Fire. And it's really it is one of the best films of this YA genre. So overall, that is my ranking of the Hunger Games films. Let me know your thoughts, your ranking. Let's get into a fun discussion in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys soon.